Hello, and welcome to the Simply Business Interview Podcast, a podcast created by business owners for business owners. I am your host, John Jennings. And I believe that most business owners are working way too hard for much too little. And one of our issues is that we overcomplexify things. I believe the answers are almost always within us or within our reach. I like to say that I'm a simple man with simple ideas. So welcome to Simply Business. All right, today I am really happy to be joined by Cathe Dykstra, who's the CEO of Family Scholar House. This is be honest, I thought of it as I won't say small, but a local charity, nonprofit that did some cool things. I remember touring it 5 or 6 years ago, I think. They've been around for 20 years, just had their 20-year anniversary, but I was blown away by the numbers that Cathe shared with me. So Cathe, introduce yourself and then tell us a little more about what you do there at Family Scholar House.
Well, thank you so much for having me, John. It is a delight to be here. As CEO of Family Scholar House, I lead the part of our organization that is responsible for providing affordable housing and comprehensive services for student parents. But as you and I discussed a few years ago, our organization birthed our own parent. So I am also the CEO of Family Inc., which is the parent company. And all the programs that were under Family Scholar House that had grown tremendously became siblings to Family Scholar House. So I also have FSH Works, FSH Affiliates, FSH Resources, FSH Canvas, and FSH Real Estate, in addition to Family Scholar House. And that has given us a 48-state footprint.
Wow. And how many people did you impact last year, you told me?
So last year it was 106,004 households across 48 states. And I'm sure everybody's thinking, oh, the 48 or the 48 continental. And that's not the case. We have Hawaii and Alaska, but we don't have North Dakota or Vermont. So we'll figure that out. We'll figure that out.
We got to work on getting those other two states in the mix somehow.
Random. It's just so random. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Well, congratulations on that. Congratulations on that fantastic growth. I know you have a great mission, and it's really cool to hear how that has grown. Take us back a little bit. How did this come about? How did you step into that role? And just tell us about kind of the early growing pains of starting a nonprofit.
So I was at the Center for Women and Families. I was the director of the Economic Success Program, and I knew about Project Women, which was the previous name of our organization. I knew about it from the outside because we had a shared client, and their executive director left largely because she did not want to raise money. Note to self, if you are the executive director of a nonprofit and do not want to raise money, you are in the wrong role. So yeah. The board was at a really a tipping point. They needed to decide whether to close or grow. And they were only serving 4 people. Four people. Also had 4 staff members. I'd never worked anywhere with a 1-to-1 ratio. I knew that was neither sustainable nor scalable. And I have the benefit of coming from an economics background and not a social work background. I love my social workers, but I'm not one. And so I was able to sort of take a look at this from a cost benefits analysis perspective and say, okay, well, this dog doesn't hunt. And so something's got to change. And the board really did want something different. Not all the board, some of the board members really did want something different. And I said, if you hire me, a year from now, I'll be the only face you recognize, because people who've gotten used to serving 4 folks are not going to like what's coming. And that doesn't make them bad people. It just means things are going to change so rapidly that they may not be able to adjust. And one of them, who's now a district court judge, she leaned in and said, "Will you still be here?" And I said, "Yep, but it's only going to be me." And she said, "Then do it." And so I was given permission to do that. And there were some really big early challenges. I mean, huge. Now I can read financials. The financials looked great. So that wasn't a problem until I found out that the financials were not exactly accurate. And we all know that that's naughty. So there were some things that needed to be straightened out very, very quickly because we actually, within 2 weeks of me getting there, we weren't making payroll. And you don't leave a great job with a staff of 13 and all the supports of a larger nonprofit to come to a small nonprofit and put a padlock on the door. So I had to hit the ground running. And the two things that I cared the most about in doing that, one was communicating our mission, and the other was communicating our outcomes. Everybody loves a good story, but they love it more when there's data to back it up. Everybody loves, well, most everybody loves data, but it's becomes more real when there's a story that goes with the
Oh
data,
yeah. Yeah.
combining the two things. And they really didn't have, they hadn't been tracking outcomes. So I started by going through, going through the files, writing everything down and creating Excel spreadsheets and all that sort of stuff. And that really is a very important part of our founding, or like the growth that we had early on, because that is some of what led to us building our own database starting in 2018 that would track all the things that we care about because we couldn't find what we were looking for commercially. So building it out on the Salesforce platform with shield level encryption, with the help of the Humana Foundation, those sorts of things, those seeds were planted very early on when I was looking for the outcomes in paper files that were stored in a single file cabinet in the building. Quick story, just to give you, like, if you can visually imagine this. We were in the basement of the Cloister apartment building, which was the old Ursuline convent. Okay.
Mhm.
And it was downhill. And the way it was designed, the MSD had worked really hard to try to figure out flood flow, but it was not right. And it just, when it rained, it flooded. So I come in early on, like this first or second day, and I noticed that all of the computers are sitting on plastic turned over bins, like you would store kids' toys in. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what's this? They're brightly colored, blue, red, green, yellow. I'm like, what's this? And they said, oh, that's so we don't get electrocuted when it rains. I'd never I'd never worked anywhere where my biggest concern coming in and turning on my computer was whether or not I was going to get electrocuted. I'm just like, wow, okay, that's something different. So there were a lot of it was interesting because the people that were there, great people, and even great board members, had accepted the circumstances. They had accepted that the way you don't get electrocuted is to put your computer on blocks, not,
Yeah.
oh my God, this is crazy. We're not doing this. So, as you can imagine, I shook things up pretty fast because that's not okay. And so
Yeah.
in wanting
That's treating the symptom. We call that treating the symptom, not the cure, right?
Right. In wanting to actually revitalize the organization and take it to scale and make it sustainable, we weren't going to have an orientation for new employees that explained about the blocks and not electrocuting yourself. We just weren't doing that. So,
Oh wow. So much there. I wrote down about half a dozen things we could talk about. So I know we'll run out of time before we run out of ideas. And I love that reminder about if you're going to start a nonprofit, you have to be willing. I see that all the time. Where I see it more is somebody who starts their own business, a solopreneur, and then they don't want to sell. And I'm like, how are you going to have money if you don't want to sell? They just think, well, I will announce it and people will start showing up. It just doesn't work that way. It doesn't work in nonprofits. It doesn't work in business. I'd like to hone in on especially two things. One was this recognizing from the start you were going to bring a lot of turmoil through change.
mhm.
Um, let, let's hit on that again because boy, when I've kind of been in those shoes where you're put in charge of a team that's struggling or whatever, take over a business that's failing, and you just have to almost like you almost have to like start from scratch, but you can't really afford to start from scratch. Usually, you have to kind of nuance that. But how what was your approach? How did you sell that to the people? Did all of them leave? you know,
Yeah.
that
Of those first other three, yeah.
yeah,
And,
uh,
and they needed to go. It
yeah,
just was not the right fit for who we were going to be.
right,
But there are two really cool things about this. One is that a few years ago, I was talking about we were doing some big changes around birthing our parent company, around changing all the employees to work for family and then be assigned to a subsidiary. And I said, well, I just don't understand. I said to our chief learning officer, I just don't understand why change is so hard for people. I mean, I love change, and she and I've known each other for forever. And she said, well, of course you do. You're the one always making it. And there's a really important lesson in that. It's
yeah,
easy to love change when you're the one doing it because you've had
yeah,
time to think it through, embrace it, you've chosen the path. So so it was a really good call to me to remember you're not a leader if you have no followers. That
yeah,
you're not leading anything if you turn around and nobody's behind you. So pacing change, breaking it off in bits and pieces when that's necessary, but still sharing the bigger vision so that people understand, we're going on vacation, we're going to drive all the way to California, but let's talk about where we're going to stay over the first night. We're going to
yeah,
go as far as St. Louis. Here's what
yeah,
we're going to see in St. Louis. And designing the path that way has been very helpful for our staff. Just for perspective, we went into COVID with 18 staff and came out with 58.
wow,
So the growth has been really fast. Now I think I'm at 67 today. And that doesn't count any of the AmeriCorps, any of the Vistas, any of the volunteers, over 2,000 volunteers a year. It doesn't count any of those folks that are not on the payroll.
yeah,
But it's a lot of hands, and
that is,
everybody has to understand we're going to California.
yeah,
Tonight, we're staying in St. Louis, and we
yeah.
have a really big arch there. It's going to be cool. And then we're going to get back in the car and head to the next stop.
Yeah, it's funny. I have this change model that I teach my clients all the time, and you hit on all three key components to it. To overcome resistance and change, they have to be unhappy with where things are. They have to have a vision of where you want them to go, and you've got to provide a clear, easy path to get there, or at least those first steps. And that's exactly what you just described. Yeah. So I love that. It's like, wow, she just described it. It's called Gleischer's formula, named by a name Gleischer, obviously. But it's funny. You just described it. Probably never heard of that before, but
No, but I
but
do. As somebody who embraces change, I have to be keenly aware of people who are resistant to it, or
yeah,
just uncomfortable or afraid, and how I can bring them with me. Because if I'm not bringing them with me, again, I'm not leading anything if I've got no followers.
yeah. I remember in one of my corporate roles, I was in management, senior management, I'm not sure. We were doing a restructuring, and I was involved with the restructuring design and rolling that out. And I remember I made a comment about, this changes. I love this stuff. This is cool. Why don't why are people complaining? And I remember, I don't remember who said it, but I just remember someone said, John, people don't hate change, but victims do. And the point being, people who have, we've all been victimized by change as well. We've been through a layoff, we've been through a restructuring where we didn't like the outcome, we've been through change of boss or other things that just didn't go the way we want, and that sticks with us, right? Those painful things stick with us longer than the successes. But
Yeah.
um, that's cool. You have a clear uh, sense of vision and everything. That's another thing I love. So, um, talk about how you communicate. You said communicating mission and outcomes is important. And way I want to couch this is I have I meet a lot of business owners who have a vision, they'll have a mission statement, they'll have their values, whatever, but they never ever talk about them. And then they don't understand why their team's not on board. And I'm like, when's the last time you actually just talked about your vision? When's the last time you talked about your values? Oh, people don't have time for that. I'm guessing you talk about that a lot. So tell me
A
more.
lot, externally and internally. And I don't think you can afford not to,
Mhm.
because particularly right now, workers want to be a part of something that matters.
Yeah.
And if they don't understand why it matters, uh, then they'll find another job. And you
Yeah.
can hire really talented people, but fail to communicate why what they do, how it fits into the mission and the vision of the organization, and lose them because of that. Because of that. So I think it's really important that you communicate that. We're in the process of finalizing our, and we've already done our strategic plan for 3 years that started January 1, but we're finalizing the full document. And I had a couple of our staff members say, well, why is it so important that we finalize the bigger thing, not the little briefing we put together that's 2 pages? And I said, because this is how we get through these 3 years. This is the growth, and this is the
Yeah.
roadmap. And it's a living document. This is not something we do and stick in a file. And when
Yeah.
somebody says, do you have a strategic plan? We go, yeah,
Yeah. Let me pull
I
this
think
binder
we
off
do.
the shelf.
Think we do. This one's only 3 years. We've previously done 5 years, but finished it in like 18 months. So
Yeah.
we decided, well, let's not do 5 years. Let's do 3. And the 3 is very aggressive, but everybody has to be involved in it.
Yeah.
It strikes me as odd sometimes when my peers will say, oh yeah, no, the board and I put together a strategic plan, but it's confidential. We don't share it with employees.
Yeah.
Why not? What how are the people who are rowing the boat going to row you to where you're going if they can't see where it is? You know,
Right.
so having everybody involved is a big part of that. And
Yeah.
that is, because we're so large now, that is done by subsidiary, but each subsidiary is got the leadership to then engage everyone in that work, but also to understand how all the subsidiaries fit together towards the exact same mission, to empower families to lift themselves out of poverty and enter the workforce and have careers and great lives, right? And
Yeah.
it makes everybody better. So I think it's really important that that you are communicating it well with stories and data, and that when you put together that strategic plan, it isn't me and a legal pad with my board chair. It's got to be, everybody's got to be involved.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. So, and as a person, as a coach who preaches and encourages people to do strategic planning, I appreciate the shout out there to my industry, because that's uh, be surprised how many people I've seen that very same thing happen. Let's go off in a corner. Let's go off in secret. Have the board create a strategic plan. Um, let's keep that quiet. We know where we're going.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, John, this seems like a little thing, but we don't do board retreats. We do board advances because we're not backing up for anybody.
okay.
So it seems like a little thing, but you'd be surprised how it changes the focus of the board when they start saying what I've said for years. It's a board advance, like a retreat, only forward. And so you get the sense that we're meeting to talk about going forward. We're not getting into a foxhole to figure out how to hold our ground or to get to a safe place that's behind enemy line. This isn't that. And it's just a change of a word, but it matters that we use
Yeah.
the right words.
Yeah. So you mentioned you had a background in economics or business, right? And so um, was it marketing part of that, or
It was, but the hard way. I changed my major 5 times in
okay?
college. Um,
Okay.
I hope that's, my dad finally put me in the car and drove me around saying, graduate. Just there's got to be
Just
something
graduate.
you like better than everything else. And that would be the one I would pick, graduate. But But economics was really my favorite. I really
Really?
liked the principles
Yeah.
and both macro and micro, but really understanding how supply and demand interact and diminishing utility, the law of diminishing utility, and right now as we're nationally talking about the impact of tariffs. It's funny because people would love to have a soundbite from you, but they don't want the larger conversation. And it's not a
Yeah.
soundbite, it's a larger conversation. Um,
Yeah.
so the economic principles have really been an important part of how I have led our organization, because I'm often looking at what is the cost benefit of that,
Mhm.
and what's the diminishing utility? What happens when do we get to the point where putting in more effort does not give us more
Yeah.
result? And at what
Right.
point is that?
Yeah. That's fascinating. So you apply this, economics is a more technical aspect of business. I enjoyed economics as well, but never really put it to use in that way. But that's fascinating. But you talk a lot. Just the little bit that I know, you tell you relate to people through story, which is a fairly modern, contemporary approach to marketing. And I think 20 years ago, people weren't really thinking of marketing as telling your story. It was something different. Uh, what Where did that come from, and uh, how do you use it in your regular
Well,
day to day?
I grew up in a family of storytellers, and
Okay.
that's how we communicated our history, and that's how we talked about our family members. But um, in my role, I actually think it is the absolute best way for people to understand the impact.
Mhm.
And often it's not me telling the story, it's the graduate telling their own story. We have 883 college degrees that have been earned just in Louisville from our program. When I
Oh wow.
got there in 2005, that number was two. So it's changed, right?
Yeah.
It's accelerated greatly. And so recently we did a video with one of our graduates and her daughter, and she talked about being 17 years old and pregnant and valedictorian at Butler High School, coming out of high school, disconnected from her family, had nowhere to go, and that we became her family. Her daughter is now 17. And I
Oh
get
wow.
chills when I think about it, because she's talking about, this was me at 17. This is my daughter at 17. And she is now a nurse practitioner, a doctor of nursing practice for Norton, working in the West End Hospital, giving back to her community.
Uh,
And her
that's so
daughter
cool.
has had an entirely different experience than she did.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, I could give you charts and data and, all uh, the history of the organization. Nothing will hit you the same
As
as
a story.
hearing that and understanding that that investment in her is paying dividends that we will never even be able to calculate in how she is serving the community and the young woman she's raised, who now has a different set of opportunities.
Wow. That's fantastic. And I love hearing those stories. And there's uh yeah, just it's one reason I bring nonprofit people on here. I think you guys have, I'm typically a business coach. I'm usually talking to companies that are trying to drive profits, but I think nobody has a bigger challenge in leadership and inspiration than nonprofit leaders. And there's so much we can learn from you. Uh, uh, and like I said, we could probably talk for another half hour, but I want to respect your time. I want to talk a little bit about the future. Where are you going next? What's happening with Family Inc?
Yeah. So we've doubled our budget 4 years in a row.
Wow.
And the bigger it gets, the harder that is. This year, our budget is for the whole Family Inc. is a little over $20 million for just programs and services. That's not
Wow.
buildings. That's it's a lot.
Yeah.
And that money has to be raised. But I never worry. I know that sounds crazy, but I never worry about money. I don't know anybody who worries about money who has more of it, People
Yeah.
don't give money to worried people. I communicate what we do and why I believe it matters. And people who have an affinity for that, for a variety of reasons, caring about kids, caring about healthcare, all of it, um,
Yeah.
become participants in that. There will be additional growth. We have 5 campuses here in Louisville now. We will have 1, 2, 3, 4 more within the next 15 months. One of those is in Houston, Texas. The rest are fairly local. And then I expect we'll have another 6 that within the next 3 to 4 years after that.
Wow.
Family Scholar House itself is growing, but the other subsidiaries are growing even faster, particularly
Mm.
FSH Works, which works with Medicaid companies, employers who want to make sure that they're providing support for entry-level employees so that they don't leave or lose their job. So we help them find transportation or childcare or housing or whatever that might be, so that HR doesn't have to. Boy, the
Yeah.
HR people love me. Please, please do this for us. We also work with colleges and universities across the country, helping them
Yeah.
keep the students they've worked so hard to get, so
Mm.
that a flat tire isn't the reason somebody withdraws, or a pregnancy, or a sick mother. So we help with all that. So those areas are growing. And our healthcare talent pipeline is in 9 states right now, and that is growing. And then the last thing I want to mention is we have made a switch to modular construction. And so we're doing
Mm.
modular construction for our Sellersburg Scholar House campus, for our downtown one that's adjacent to the LUMED district, that is in development now.
Right.
And we're also doing single family home modular construction on infill
Wow.
lots in Louisville. And we will also be involved with Eastern Kentucky flood recovery. So
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
modular homes. And so that is giving us an opportunity to not just talk about how you house people in the moment when they're desperate and need affordable housing, but how you provide that next step so that they have a place to go where they can own it and build a future for themselves and their family.
Yeah. Yeah. What I love about what y'all do is I mean, we certainly need nonprofits to help during, we just had storms here last night. We need nonprofits that can step in and help triage during the emergency, but you're doing things that it just has long-term value. And like you said earlier, you can calculate it, which is uh,
Thank
really, really amazing. So what, two times growth, 4 years in a row?
Yes.
How, how, how many business owners that's listening right now would love to have that problem? I mean, and it has, I'm sure, the challenges is equally as equal as um, the appreciation that you have in the good feelings are offset by at times by all the work, or maybe I should say it the other way around. The hard work is offset by the great
Yeah.
feelings about what you're doing.
Part of that is just not being afraid.
Yeah.
I mean, we've created a blame-free environment here. I've worked very hard on that and to help people understand, yes, we have accountability, but you're not going to get in trouble for making a mistake, because if you're afraid to make a mistake, you're not going to do anything creative.
Yeah.
And we're innovating and growing and creating as we go. So you've got to be okay with having a misstep, fixing it, learning from it, and then going again.
Yeah.
And that culture, creating the culture that you want, that has to be intentional. It does
Yeah.
not happen by accident. The culture you get when you're not actively involved in it is not the one you want.
Yeah. You are the epitome of what I call abundance mindset, right? There's no scarcity thinking in your brain at all. And I
Yeah.
think that's another great learning here, is that if you want to succeed, you have to think with confidence, and you have to think big, and that's what's going to help you grow. Well, Cathe, this has been great. Why don't you give us your contact information, or how to, if someone wants to support or needs the help of any of your systems, how best to get in hold of you?
Absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's super easy. Cathe Dykstra on LinkedIn. But also, familyscholarhouse.org is the website for Family Scholar House, but familybrands.family is the website for the larger parent company that will then link you to all of the different subsidiaries. It will also allow you to see a video that is comprehensive in explaining how all these things fit together, because this isn't, these are not unrelated things. Everything, all of the subsidiaries work together. And I think the video does a really good job of using participant stories to share that.
Yeah, very, very cool. Well, it has been a pleasure,
Great.
and we'll put that contact information in there so people will hopefully find you and reach out. Check them out, Family Scholar House and
Familybrands.family.
family brands.family. I'll have to work on that one, but we certainly appreciate you coming on the show and sharing a little bit of your story. I know there's so much more we could talk about, but this has been inspirational and encouraging to me, and I know many others that listen.
Thank you very much, John. It was great to be here.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you liked it, please share or like it on whatever platform you use. You can find me on social media. On most platforms, I'm John K. Jennings. My first book is also available. Your Baby is Ugly tells you about 10 truths that business owners need to hear, but often won't, and how to overcome them. You can find it on Amazon. Just search for Your Baby is Ugly. And be watching for our next episode, where I'll interview another business owner who will share their stories and insights into what it's like to create a great business.